The only thing that mattered was how I carry forward. It's up to me to decide, do I let this happen to me or do I happen to it? One of the things I'm always so thoughtful about is recognizing every day who owns your life. For the mental health component, we talk to the students about it. There are so many mental exercises that we can raise our kids with to do. I feel like we're in a world where something happens and then we crash and get help. We're not doing a lot of things like meditation or yoga, like all the things that people will pay to go to classes. But we have so many things we can do in 3 and 5 minute spurts throughout the day that help us get a handle on who we are and how we think and respond. I do a little exercise probably 4 or 5 times a day called STOP. I walk into another room, it takes about a minute, and the acronym is settle down, take a breath, own it, poof.
This is Sparta!
Welcome back to Spartan Leadership. I'm your host, Josh Kosnick, and this is your podcast for leadership, inspiration, and impact. And today will be no different. I got a great guest who came to us from a mutual friend, Alana Stott, former podcast guest as well. Her name is Nancy Gale, and she is a designer, business owner, mentor, and activist whose journey has taken her from an unimaginable personal tragedy to global recognition. She is the founder of JAMAH, a luxury American handbag brand built on craftsmanship and purpose and ambition. A nonprofit entrepreneurial program for disadvantaged youth. I got to get my words right today. There we go. A nonprofit entrepreneurial program for disadvantaged youth. Her work has been featured in Vogue, Robb Report, and In Style. She's partnered with figures like Sir Richard Branson and designed for celebrities like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. But her story isn't about fame, it's about grit. Nancy's a survivor of both rape and the brutal murder of her mother. Instead of giving up, she built a mission-driven brand and a life dedicated to helping others rise. Nancy, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, I'm so excited to get into this conversation. Alana had so many good things to say about you, and you get to visit our friend after we get done recording today, so you'll have to tell her hello.
I absolutely will.
Awesome. Well, let's start at the beginning. Tell me about your background. What shaped you early on, and how did that lead to starting JAMAH?
So I lived in Detroit for 10 years, from 7 to 17, at the height of economic prosperity. And so I was very much in tune with what was going on with the motor industry. And it was such an interesting time to be there. And I always used to, even as a young girl, I was fascinated by the fact that we were so known for the motor car industry, but nobody, and actually architecture as well. But what was always so fascinating was somehow when it came to design and fashion, Detroit, really the U.S., was kind of frowned upon, right? And all the really great luxury brands were all slotted to European brands. And that was always so fascinating just because how could we build these amazing industries, have so much success, and how is it that anyone couldn't imagine that we could have fashion designers that are of that ilk? And so that was just always something that sat in my mind. I actually, out of college, became a technical writer. Even though I always knew I wanted to go into fashion, I diverted because I thought people would take me more seriously if I did something that sounded more serious. And it was something I was sort of battling with when I got out of college, as people would say to me, wow, it's so interesting when we start conversations. You're so intelligent. You're so articulate. You're so well read. How can that be? Because what I looked like was the happy, blonde, fun girl. And so instead of tackling that, I thought I'll just go down a path where people will assume just from my title that I have this intelligence. And then as I grew up, I realized that was not the right path. And I needed to do what I knew would really fulfill me, because I knew if I was doing something I loved, I would be driven to work really hard to dedicate myself. And so, again, always knowing I wanted to be in the fashion industry, I really leaned into this realization that I had about manufacturing in the U.S. And at the time, the big brands were really like the big brands were all known, with all this conversation around Europe. And so I ended up going to my first atelier, and I came back and I realized, I see what it is. You go to Europe, you go to an atelier, which is just a little like room the size of a box with pins and needles on the ground. It's not fancy. It's, but you can feel the love of craft. And I thought when I got home, I said, they use these words. They say things like curate, atelier, craftsmanship. It's all so beautiful. And I come back to the States, and we do the exact same thing, but the words we use are manufacturing, production, factory. It's just so not sexy. And it hit me, right? That's all marketing and branding, whether it's done by an industry or by accident, because our vocabulary is a bit different. And so I thought, I want to become, I don't want to be just a brand. I want to be known as the first true American luxury, made in the USA handbag house. And I knew someone would do it at some point, but I'm really, really incredibly patient. So I figured it may as well be me. I'm just going to dig in, and it's probably going to take me a quarter of a century to even have the recognition. And I always felt, having lived in Detroit in that era and watching the so much industry going to China, we go through these waves. You figure I always guessed at some point we'll be back here. And so I'm tightening the story, but eventually in 2000, I launched the brand, was doing a lot of work in the entertainment industry at the time. And a few years later, decided now it's really time. And here I am now. January, we turned 25.
Congrats.
We are, thank you, small but mighty. And we have a name now. And I get orders from all over the world. And a few years ago, I launched the JAMAH Motorcar Collection, which, unbeknownst to me, has never been done. I make cars specifically our bags specifically to reflect people's automobiles. And that turned my brand on its ear. And it's been just crazy and exciting ever since. And it's also brought a lot of attention to my classic brand.
That's awesome. So, what, as you were telling the story, it made me think of the movie Ford versus Ferrari, and you growing up in Detroit, and, the Ford brass going over to Italy and seeing how Ferrari were made, and Enzo Ferrari getting kind of pissed off and using those words to describe Ford and the production and manufacturing, and not using words like craftsmanship and some of the sexy words that Ferrari was known for. So as you were telling that story, I was like, oh man, it's so many parallels right there.
I love that. And it's amazing because my factory is 20 minutes from my home. I could spend 8 hours a day there just watching my sewer. I mean, and there's so much love connected between the needles and the threads and the two of the brothers that run the factory. And I think, oh my gosh, how did we miss this for so long? And the perfection, it's like watching someone do a dance at the machine, like just this absolute, the perfected movement. And it's really amazing because every one of my bags is made start to finish by the same person. So when it comes out, like I'm connected to that person. And then that means my client is connected to me, who's connected to that person. And it's just, there's so much beauty that sort of goes beyond the bounds of just, okay, here's a bag and someone's making your bag.
Yeah. So you're 20 years old, or not you, your company was 20 years old when you
25.
No, I know it is now, but
Oh,
I think you mentioned it was 20 when you flipped into get into the car, reflecting the car, the automotive,
sorry.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. What was the pivot there, or what was the idea spark there that helped you create that vertical in your business?
So I had met someone, they remaster Porsches, and they asked me to do a bag that would fit in a certain area. And, they're called Gunther Works. And we did this, and I actually got the, Pepita sent from Porsche. And it was kind of cool because I'm doing something for a car and it fits a certain way. But I kept feeling like, God, there's more to this. I don't know what it is. But I had already decided, like, I'm definitely going down this path. And I was out at a racetrack towards Palm Springs called Thermal. And I met this gentleman, and we started talking about his car collection. And he was telling me, my wife is my biggest fan, but she doesn't race. She doesn't drive. This is not like really her world, but she's so supportive. And he had this beautiful 1965 Alfa Romeo, and it was red with one yellow marking over the front driver's side wheel well. So we started talking more, and I said, well, like, we could make a bag for her that kind of reflects the car so she'd feel connected, and we can inscribe a message in it and take a video, like make a video of the making of the bag and make her feel like she's really part of this. And he loved it. And so I went to work, and because it was an Alpha and their logo was a serpent, we did the bag in red anaconda. And then one side is yellow and reflects the shape of that marking over the wheel well. And then he wrote a beautiful love note to her, which we inscribed inside. And we made the video. And we actually got to be there when he presented it to her, which was really beautiful. And that just started the thing. And then I was actually just in a fireside chat the other day. And I said, it used to be men would meet me and say, stay away from my wife, because they knew that it would end up costing a lot. So, but in the car world, now people, they'll tell me, oh, it's made it so much easier to approach my wife about the next car I want to add to my collection, because now she knows if I get a new car, she gets a new bag.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what a cool concept to tie it in, because that's his baby. And so she may feel left out in that regard. And by the way, there are several women that I know that are very into cars as well. So not excluding that, but what a cool way for the male in that relationship that has this really awesome car or fascination with cars in general to bring his spouse into the fold. That's amazing.
Yeah. And then what's been really incredible is I started my nonprofit Ambition 15 years ago. And a lot of my car clients now have gotten, not only do they support Ambition through our scholarship fund, some of my clients are now mentoring some of my students. So now all these pieces of my life just come together. They just blend into this one. Like, I wake up every day thinking, oh my gosh, I have the most amazing life.
Oh, that's awesome. What were some of the toughest, you start this from the ground up, and this is, the story of entrepreneurship in general is like, there are these really tough moments. We go from idea to creation, and then we're hoping that the world loves our idea, and that just doesn't happen right away. But what were some of the toughest moments for you early on to get this thing off the ground?
So one of the things I think back on is, obviously, we talk a lot about, people around you and the support you can get. I couldn't find support anywhere when I had this idea of becoming this, renowned luxury made in the USA brand. And as time went on, what I realized, right, is I'm putting so much energy into trying to defend why this will work to all these people who just can't see my vision. And I feel like that was a big, big stumbling block, because you'll never get anyone to see that until it happens, right? Like I had a vision for this, but it doesn't mean someone else does. And so I think I hurt myself by sort of buying into that. And I realize now in hindsight, it's not right to even be angry at that or feel not supported. I have to go to places and have the confidence and the drive to continue beyond anyone who's telling me I can't do this. Because what I've really learned with everybody I know that has built brands, especially products that have never been done before, is a lot of people can't see something that doesn't exist. They're better at something else. For me, I could see something that didn't exist. And I knew if I just dug in every single day. But I feel like some of the hardest parts of that are sticking to what you're doing when you feel like you're failing at every turn. And so, and that's something that I realized I had to overcome every single day. I think I had this idea that one day, I'll feel it so strongly that it won't matter what anybody says. But that just kept seeping into my head. And what it was anytime someone who was successful would give me advice, I decided they knew more than I did, instead of realizing they know more than I do in what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know if that really answers the question, because it wasn't like a specific thing, but in hindsight, it's something that I really let take me down.
Yeah. So you're saying that a lot of times the outsiders that were giving you advice it wasn't necessarily the proper advice, because it was a different industry, but you deemed them successful. So you're kind of following their lead, and it didn't always work out for you.
Exactly. And I have the craziest analogy. So I used to do a lot of skydiving, and one day I lost my peripheral, and I couldn't really get my compass down, and I'm looking around and I see a guy, and I know he's a really great skydiver. So I follow him and set up for my landing, and I go like sliding through this, the desert, the stinger nettles. And what I realized is I just looked up and I decided that someone was better than I was. And so I should follow their path. And I realized I started doing that in my business as well. I mean, if I were around the people that were supporting me in my circles, my family, you couldn't stop me in my excitement, my vision, my drive. And then you put me into another room, and although I'm very outgoing and social, all of a sudden I decide everybody knows more than I do. And I think that's a really common theme.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's absolutely a common theme, and people struggle with this all the time. And it's not actually just in the entrepreneurial world. Like, we struggle as humans with self-worth and self-confidence, and therefore it lets us not necessarily achieve what we're truly capable of achieving, not understanding that God gave us really, really unique skill sets and gifts that were only meant for us. And when we don't lean into those and follow and trust God's plan for us, and we think that someone else has a better plan or a better idea, or they know more than us, and we start falling off our path and trying to follow their path, that's where that lack of self-confidence, that's where that lack of self-worth comes in. And that's where sometimes failure can come in as well.
Yes. Yep. 100%.
But you had this undying belief in yourself despite any of these naysayers and some of that what now. So you mentioned ambition briefly. Let's talk through that. So it's not just a nonprofit, it's a movement. You know, what inspired you to create it, and how are you seeing it transform lives of the young people out there?
So for me, I feel like I had this kind of idyllic childhood, and I started thinking as I got older, and especially with the wealth of my clients, like, what does it really mean? Like, what does wealth really mean? And what does that give you? And I started thinking, gosh, I had so much access and exposure in my life. And it started dawning on me, like, that's very different than having money. Fortunately, I came from a good family. I was provided for, but it started to really resonate with me, that the realization that access and exposure is the greatest gift that you can give to youth. And so what happens if you didn't grow up at my dinner table? And so I started thinking, gosh, what does that look like for me? I want to be able to work with disadvantaged teenagers. And I love working with teenagers, which I know is crazy. They even think it's crazy. And I realized the things that I had that the kids that we work with don't are not only access and exposure, but the most important thing is consistency. So I thought I want to kind of bring students to my dinner table that don't have what I had. And that looked like a mentorship program. And then I started looking around at a lot of the programming I saw, and everyone starts something based on, what they think is needed. What I noticed was there are so many places you can go speak to youth one time, and you might have fantastic impact, but I want something that tells our students at the end of the year that there were people there that they know believed in them because they showed up every week. So I started working with high schools. We're now partnering with Boys and Girls Club, which is really exciting. And we are with our students from September to June once a week. Every mentor has to commit to at least once a month. And it's really the first semester, all we do is get to know our students. And that comes from my realization working with these kids that if you don't know them, you cannot teach them. If you don't understand the home to which they are walking into at the end of every day, you can throw all the financial literacy and AI and robot. It doesn't matter what it is. If you don't know them, you cannot teach them. So we have a program called You Don't Know About Me, and we spend the first 3 months only getting to know the kids. And ultimately, they do their official You Don't Know About Me, which means and so do the mentors. They get on camera, and with power, not pity, they announce their greatest challenge, most importantly, how they got through it, and then they wrap it up with a humble flex. And the point is that we can look at these kids and they can understand that their challenges do not dictate their constitution, that we can always hold two truths. No matter what we're going through, that does not have to break who we really are. And then the second semester, we focus mostly on marketing, because that was the one thing that I realized, no matter who you're working with, no one is ever going to suffer from learning marketing, whether it's how they present themselves if they want to go to college or to get a job or to go into marketing. We know that no kid will not benefit from that.
Yeah, that is amazing. And I love the structure that you have of it, because I've always stated that accountability without a relationship is harassment, but accountability with a relationship is love. And just like you said, if you don't know them, right, you can't teach them. So very, very similar analogy there. And getting them on camera, stage, whatever it may be, because speaking in front of people is the number one fear in the world, over death, which is crazy. I talk to my kids about this all the time because I have 3 little girls and a little boy, and my 2 oldest girls are like, I hate speaking in front of people. I was like, well, we're going to practice, because it's a skill that everyone needs, and it's not a rational fear. So
that's so great.
Now that they're like, oh, it's easy for you, Dad, because you speak on stages all the time. I said, well, it wasn't always easy for me. It's easy for me now because I speak on stages all the time. It's those 10,000 hours. So it's, I love your structure and your heart behind it. And because you're the perfect person to teach it. Like I mentioned in your bio, you know, you said you grew up in privilege, but in your bio, you also overcame rape and the murder of your mother. And so you've also overcome some really, really hard things in your life and speak to it from power and not pity. And we're in the month of May. We're recording this in the month of May. And maybe you can speak to this if it's not bringing up anything too tough for you. But mental health is a passion of mine, and making sure that people can get that help they need and get their brains healthy so they can live a more productive life. What were the struggles, and how did you overcome your mental health through those two major life instances that you had?
So I think, so when I was in 7th grade, my mom became very, very ill and was in a low-grade coma in the hospital for 2 years. And then the next 2 years, she was in and out of the hospital, in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she'd be she would appear completely fine. She had 13 major surgeries, and somehow she rallied from all of that. But I always think back to that time because my dad and my mom, when she was conscious, would talk, and they wanted to make sure that I had the most normal childhood. And I remember one day hearing my mom and her sister talking because her sister was concerned that I wasn't understanding the gravity of the situation. And my mom and dad said, no, we need Nancy to understand that no matter what happens, the world goes forward. And that's the world she's going to live in. No matter how this pans out or other things in her life pans out, you have to continue marching forward. And so they wanted me to see that then, and that in hindsight, that even something like that, taking my mom away for all those years, was not going to dictate the way my life would go, that I dictate the way my life goes. And so I feel like that ended up, it made me seriously independent. My older sister was already, after the first year, she was 5 years older, so she was already out of the house. And I feel like that set me up to recognize that we can always hold those two truths. So when I was 25 is when I was raped. I was just walking down the street in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and just suddenly I went down. And I remember shortly after I was listening to a commercial. It was in the Rape Crisis Center, which was the only place that really had space for people that were going through this. And I listened to this one commercial, and I felt like I was being told how I had to respond, like a victim. And I didn't feel like that. I felt like I crossed paths with someone who I didn't know if they were evil or they were in a bad place in their life. But what I realized was the only thing that mattered was how I carry forward. And I have to it's up to me to decide, is this something like, do I let this happen to me or do I happen to it? So I think one of the things that I'm always so thoughtful about is recognizing every day who owns your life. And I think that as far as the mental health component, we talk to the students about it so often. I feel like there's so many mental exercises that we can raise our kids with to do. I feel like we're in a world where something happens and then we kind of crash and then we get help. And we're not doing a lot of things like even the practice, right, of meditation or yoga, like all the things that people will pay to go to classes. But we have so many things we can do in like 3 and 5 minute spurts throughout the day that help us really get a handle on who we are and how we think and how we respond. Like I do a little exercise probably 4 or 5 times a day called STOP. And it stands for, I walk into another room, it takes about a minute. And it's, the acronym is settle down, take a breath, own it, poof. And it's just my reset. And so it always just brings me back to a level place. And because what I see so often is in this quest for our mental health, people are now like signing up for so many things and then they don't have time to do them. And so I feel like we need a mix of all the big things, but what are the things we can do in our own space that we can bring out that are just exercises that will help really secure our foundation? And so what I did with after I was raped is I found a self-defense school that I went and spoke at. And then I started speaking at more of them. And I spoke to women who were afraid of this happening to them or had happened to them or were sending their kids to self-defense school. And one of the things I learned in the first time I spoke, it was so crazy. I walk into this room and there are about 80 women. And I said, raise your hand if you've been sexually assaulted. And maybe, 2.5 hands kind of, I see a little movement. And that's it. So, a little of that. Yeah. So I start telling my story of what happened to me when I was raped. And I think it's so interesting now, considering I'm a fashion designer. But after everything happened, and then I heard ambulances, and I think I knew somehow those were for me, or I hear sirens. So I'm lying there, and I'm it's not a pretty picture, but I have on this Pepe jean jacket, and everything's kind of shredded. But my jacket seems like, I think it's intact, or I hope it is, because I was very proud of buying this jacket. And I think the way your mind helps protect you, I became completely focused on this jacket. And he had now run off. And I'm like bloody. And so I decided we're going to take this jacket for evidence. And I decided at that moment, they had enough evidence from my clothes, from my body, and I can't let them all, I need to preserve this jean jacket. So I get out of it, like what's left on me, and I roll it up, and I roll over, and I shove it under some brush because I'm going to go back tomorrow morning and get it. And in the middle of telling that story, everyone starts laughing. And in the middle of the laughter, I said, raise your hand again if you've been sexually assaulted. And over 20 hands go up. Mm. And it hit me in that moment. This is not because I'm so special and I'm making anyone comfortable. For the moment that you laugh, for the moment that you smile, you cannot be sad. You are empowered when you smile from the gut, when you laugh from the gut. And that really became sort of my MO for how I want to live my life. And it showed me again, I can make that choice to laugh, that choice to smile. And each time I do that, that'll change things just a little bit. So.
Well, that's so powerful. And I'm so sorry that happened to you. And at the same point, the sometimes God has a plan with the worst things that happen to us become the best things that happen for us because of what we do with it afterwards. And it sounds like what you've done with it afterwards has been really empowering for others. And that's how we can turn our pain into purpose.
Oh, I love that. Well, and then to your point, I think all of this set me up. And a little over 10 years ago, my mom was murdered in a home invasion. And we spent a number of years. The case was like headline news, and then it went cold. And through this amazing series of events, we got it pulled out of cold case, and we were able to put away the man who was responsible. And the same thing kept coming up for me. Like, am I someone whose mom was murdered, or am I a thriving, striving person who that is one of the things that I've experienced in my life? And I kept looking at it too, because I've always struggled with the sentence, everything happens for a reason. And I always say, have a parent murdered the way my mom was, and then try to utter that sentence. But I believe that you can put reason and purpose to your point of everything that happened. And so with my mom, I realized, gosh, as I share this story with my students, they start to find common ground with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and if, do I want to live a life that honors my mom, or do I want to live a life that now, because this happened to her, now her daughter is going to carry that burden? And I knew it. I knew the answer so quickly. And so I also started looking at, like, when things like this happen, what do they tell you or teach you? And I learned a lot about forgiveness through this whole experience. And the sort of the frailty of people, and that you never know what's going on with someone when they commit something such a heinous crime. And so it helped me to look at people differently.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing that what we didn't mention is she's in LA, and so working with the Boys and Girls Club and some of the underprivileged youth there, and her being this white blonde from Detroit, the Midwest, being in, LA, so the story that you're mentioning here of your mom being murdered, you being raped, like, this helps you connect with those kids, like you mentioned, in a way that you just showing up as a well-to-do entrepreneur and just telling that story wouldn't connect with them. So that's what part of the audience, I wanted you to get that part, especially if you're not watching on YouTube and you're just listening, to give some no pun intended color to the end of the story here. So I want to pivot a little bit, because you've partnered with some really big names, and Sir Richard Branson is one of the biggest names there possibly is. The question I have regarding this is, what have those collaborations taught you about leadership and influence?
Well, that's such a great question, especially because the way we ended up getting Richard, he was our first special guest at Ambition. And so, talking about the marketing earlier, I always ask the students, who do you want to meet? Like, who is someone that you think is, you just would die to get in front of? And it can be one of the kids said, I want to meet Bill Nye the Science Guy. Like, it can be an athlete. It can be, so Richard Branson is who the kids landed on that year. And I said, okay, so what do you need to do to meet him? And so you need to study him. Then we're going to put together a script, and we're going to film a video. And at the end of this, it's not like, hey, dude, we want to meet you because you're so cool. He has to watch this. If we can get it to him, he has to watch it and feel like he's missing out if he doesn't meet the kids of Ambition. So they did all their homework. We put together a video. We call them our reach out videos. And we started sending it around to people we knew and posting it. And I had just met someone at Virgin America, actually, when they were still Virgin America. And I sent it to her. And the next day, literally, I sent it at like 10 p.m. The next day at 2:00, I get a call. I said, well, yeah, Richard wants to meet the students at 5:00 today. He's in LA. And I said, okay, well, I want to come to him. I don't want him to come to the school. Every opportunity we have to get these kids into places that they feel like they don't belong is also magic for them. I don't know how, in 3 hours, we're suddenly at the Sunset Marquee. And they were so lovely, because they normally don't allow filming. And so they let us, and there we are, sitting with Richard Branson, the Ambition students that we could conjure up at the time. And what it taught the kids, which is such a great reminder for me, is if you do the work, you have the ability and possibility to make anything happen.
That's right.
And so I'm reminded of that every time I see my students. So I end up, I feel like taking the most from it, because it's such a tangible lesson, which we don't have as many of those often. So we started doing more of these, and we have many more stories like that. But what it also tells me, and I'm always having this conversation with a lot of mentors, there are a lot of kid gloves now. And I always hear, well, we don't want to push the kids too hard or make them feel overwhelmed or think they can do things they can't. I believe the absolute antithesis of that. When they feel that you believe in them, they will push themselves.
Yep.
And I think what's been really tricky right now is there's this idea that if you talk to a kid about working too hard, then that's going to be bad for their mental health. And so this is a big topic for us now, right? That kids working hard and making their dreams happen is really good for their mental health. And so, and we're not talking, right, like, you should work 20 hours a day and ignore your life. But the joy of hard work is a conversation. I don't know about you, but we had that growing up all the time. And in fact, I have a mentor. We used to have this banter in front of the kids. And he would say, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day of your life. And I'd say, I call BS. If you love what you do, you will have the energy and passion to work at it, to work really hard and to make success. And so that's just a conversation that we're having all the time now. Like, what is the joy of hard work? What happens when you make something happen that didn't exist? And that you get a paycheck for it and you can spend that paycheck any way you want. That is such a healthy spirit for these kids.
No, I 100% agree with you, both on the changing of that quote as well as the hard work that you can put in, because we're purpose-driven creatures. We were built to have a purpose. And going through a hard transition in my life where my business was ripped away from me, and I was in negotiations on the buyout for 6 months, I immediately said I was going to take the summer off and spend it with my kids. But as soon as I got them back in school, that pacified me for the summer because I gave myself that excuse. But as soon as I got them back in school and being the type A driven person that I am, I was going batshit crazy. And for a few months while this negotiation is taking place, not having that purpose, not having that drive, it was a real big struggle to keep my mental health afloat. And we are purpose-driven people, and hard work is meaningful, especially when it's towards something that you're uniquely gifted at, that you have a passion for. And you're right, some of the messaging that's out there right now towards these kids, and not now it's a paradox, right? Like, most of my book is on, we talked about Kairos time, but it's about finding work-life integration. I don't believe in balance because balance indicates 50-50. And so I talk through, we got to have a spiritual realm to us and focus on what our spiritual health is. We got to have a great internal, mental, emotional, and physical well-being. We got to have great relationships and focus on those along with putting in the work. And if we do those right, we'll leave a great legacy. That's what the whole book is on. But that being said, there's so many people out there saying the wrong things to these kids. And I was so fortunate. I was grown up with hard work being beat into my head. I didn't want to hear it at the time. I was fighting my father tooth and nail, but he was right.
Yeah.
So,
and I feel like right now there's this whole everything good, work bad. Like that's what I feel like is out there now. Anything. In fact, when I used to have this conversation with this mentor, when he would say that, I said, when I'm up at 2:00 in the morning, figuring out how to design a bag or pay my bills or figure out the books or our marketing campaign, it's work, but that doesn't make it bad.
That's right.
And I feel like that's the message we need to really shift. And I love what you said about the integration, because I have a thing where I always say, no on work-life balance, but yes on work-life blend. And what most of us end up finding, right, is that the people I do business with become my friends, we start working together. Like, it's this one pool, because the balance we're looking for, like, if two people are on a seesaw and one gets off, right? So we're looking for something that doesn't really exist, instead of embracing how beautiful it is if you can bring all the components of your life together.
That's right. That's exactly it. Well, I think you're one of the most perfect people to ask this question because of your entrepreneurial background, but also the tough stuff you faced in your life. What do people get wrong about resilience, and what does it take to really build it?
Oh, I think what people get wrong is that they think resilience not a choice, and resilience is absolutely a choice. And I hear that all the time. People say, "You're so lucky that you were born that way or you're made up that way." And I said, you get to choose every single day if you happen to your life or it happens to you. But I think what they get wrong, it's twofold with them, with resilience, is that you get to choose that, but you have to continue to choose that sometimes 10 times a day, sometimes 20 times a day. But I feel like that's a great mental exercise, right? With anything that we're doing that we're improving or wanting to improve our lives, we have to make those choices over and over and over again. And I feel like we get a term I always use is we get sort of cocky with our consciousness and we think, okay, good, I decided I'm resilient. Now I'm just going forward. But it doesn't work that way. So we get the luxury and the gift of making choices, but we have to continue to make those choices over and over again.
I 100% agree. And the more hard stuff that you go through, it flexes the muscle of your resilience. It gives you the option and opportunity to be resilient. And so a lot of times we try to avoid the hard stuff or making the tough call or having the difficult conversation, and therefore we don't get to flex the muscle of being resilient.
That's well said.
So you've talked a lot about holding space for two truths, right? Joy and grief, strength and vulnerability, which you've exhibited very well in some of your conversations so far today. Mm-hmm. Why is that especially important in leadership?
So, one, right, I think you're setting an example that we can always keep moving, and the people around you are seeing, no matter what's going on in your life, that you can still continue to move forward. And I think that I know everybody who works with me and for me, we look up to who that person is in the leadership role. And so if you're looking up to someone who is falling apart when things are falling apart, I think that sets a precedent for any company, right? That we're always fragile. So I think it dictates, it expresses a really solid foundation when you see someone actively managing those two truths.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. It's the ability to be powerful and vulnerable at the same time. I think a lot of people think they're mutually exclusive. And they're not. And I think the true strength comes from vulnerability. And you can take it overboard and play the victim a little bit with too much vulnerability or too much disclosure from a leadership standpoint. But it's finding that balance. It's almost like soft power. I think, a lot of times in the past, I don't know how your dad was, but my dad was very hard power because that's how he was taught. And then I learned through my father-in-law soft power and being gentle and being humble and still exhibiting a fierce strength.
Yeah, it's funny because my dad, he was born in 1924. He has a Purple Heart. He was extremely intelligent. But when my mom became ill, he had to become the mom and the dad. And so when he was much older, actually just weeks before he passed away, he actually said to me, I want to thank you for bringing softness into my world. And it was so amazing. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you know exactly what I mean. He said, if you describe me by my accomplishments and my history, I very easily could have been cold and sort of a father of that era. I could have been disconnected from you. I could have let your mom handle that side of the world. And he said, but we were put into a situation. And he said, and for all that you always say that I taught you, you taught me so much.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
That's really amazing. Last question before my ending question. When you think about legacy, what do you want people to say about the life you've built and the impact you've made?
I think I want them to say that that was happy Nancy living a life of joy and courage no matter what was going on in her world, and that she wanted to build a life that could bring whatever someone else needed to their door.
I love it. And that'd be a beautiful epitaph as well. Especially for your smile on the face. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. So for those that don't know and have not heard of JAMAH, where can they find you, follow you, buy some of your beautiful bags?
So I do a lot of commissions, and we ask anyone who's interested in the commissions, you can go onto our website, which is JAMAH.com, JAMAH, and you can purchase directly our made-to-order pieces on our website, which are about 2 to 6 weeks, or you can fill out the contact info, and we can discuss a commission, whether it's a classic bag or a motor car bag. And then ambition is ambition.org. And it tells the story. It tells the story of all our amazing students and mentors.
That's awesome. That is amazing. So I always end with this question, and it could be on anything we discussed or anything that just comes to your heart. But what is an unpopular belief that you hold to be true that you think most others disagree with?
I think that the world and our days, our practices are meant to be very simple. That the world offers a lot of things that are complicated, but that that we should have a mission to have simplicity in our lives.
So I am an EOS certified coach, and that is literally the mission that we preach as we're meeting with leadership teams and businesses. So I could not agree with you more. And it is, less is more. I was taught this early on in my entrepreneurial career, the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. So that is 100% something I can co-stamp with you in that message.
Love it. I love it.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation, Nancy. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much. This is so much fun.
This is. As Spartans, you know what to do. She dropped a ton of wisdom today. So go support JAMAH, go support ambition.org, and share this episode far and wide. I think that more people need to know about it, especially nowadays where we're getting more into made in America, manufacturing pieces, supporting American businesses. This is the time. So share this episode far and wide. Remember, the good and great are the enemies of possible. Lead like a Spartan today.
This is Sparta!